October 27th, 1944. Philippine Sea, 200 miles east of Leyte Gulf. The water was black. Not the blue-black of deep ocean, but the oil-stained black of a war zone. Thick with fuel slicks, debris, and the residue of burning ships. Aboard USS Tang, the air tasted like metal and sweat. Commander Richard O'Kane stood in the conning tower, his hands gripping the periscope handles, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Around him, the crew moved in practiced silence. They had been at sea for 60 days. They had sunk 24 Japanese vessels. They had one torpedo left, and the destroyer bearing down on them had friends. O'Kane did not flinch. He had learned long ago that hesitation killed submariners faster than depth charges. He had learned it under another captain, in another boat, and in another war that felt like centuries ago but had been only 3 years. He had learned that the ocean did not forgive mistakes, and neither did the enemy. The torpedo officer called out the firing solution. O'Kane gave the order. The last torpedo surged from the tube, its wake cutting white across the black water. Then it curved, it turned, it came back. The submarine war in the Pacific was not the war of headlines. It was not Midway or Iwo Jima. It was slow strangulation, a war of tonnage and supply lines, fought in darkness, in silence, beneath a surface the world never saw. American submarines accounted for less than 2% of the U.S. Navy, but they sank 55% of all Japanese merchant shipping. They cut the lifelines that fed the empire, oil from the Dutch East Indies, rice from Indochina, and iron from Manchuria. Every tanker sent to the bottom was a month of fuel the Japanese could not burn. Every transport sunk was a regiment that would never reach the front, but the cost was brutal. Of the 16,000 men who served in the silent service, 3,500 never came home. 1 in 5, the highest casualty rate of any branch of the American military. Submarines went out on patrol and vanished. No wreckage, no survivors, no graves. 52 boats were lost, some to depth charges, some to mines, some to their own torpedoes. Richard O'Kane knew this. He had served under Dudley Mush Morton aboard USS Wahoo, one of the most aggressive submarine commanders in the Pacific. Morton hunted Japanese convoys like a wolf, surfacing to finish crippled ships with his deck gun, pushing deep into enemy-controlled waters where no other boats dared. O'Kane was his executive officer, his partner in calculated violence. Together, they sank 20 ships. Then Wahoo went to the Sea of Japan and never returned. O'Kane took command of Tang in October 1943. He inherited a crew and a doctrine: strike hard, strike fast, get out. He added one amendment: never leave until the torpedoes are gone. By the autumn of 1944, Tang had completed 4 war patrols. She had stalked convoys from Truk to Formosa, slipped past destroyer screens, fired spreads of torpedoes into the hulls of freighters, tankers, troop ships. O'Kane's tactics were surgical. He closed to point-blank range, sometimes less than 1,000 yards before firing. It was reckless. It was also effective. At that distance, torpedoes had no time to malfunction. The enemy had no time to evade. On her 5th patrol, Tang penetrated the Formosa Strait, one of the most heavily defended waterways in the Pacific. Japanese air patrols crisscrossed the sky. Destroyers prowled the channels. Minefields choked the approaches. O'Kane didn't care. He had orders to intercept a convoy, and he intended to carry them out. On the night of October 10th, Tang found her targets, a column of cargo ships escorted by destroyers. O'Kane maneuvered into position and fired 6 torpedoes. 5 hit. 2 freighters exploded. A transport broke in half and sank in under a minute. The convoy scattered. The destroyers charged. O'Kane dove. The depth charges began. They fell like hammers. The first salvo detonated 50 feet above the hull, close enough to rattle the boat, shake loose insulation, shatter light bulbs. The crew braced against bulkheads, hands over ears, mouths open to equalize pressure. Another salvo. Closer. The hull groaned. Rivets popped. Paint flaked from the ceiling and drifted down like snow. O'Kane ordered silence. The engines were cut. The ventilation shut off. The temperature climbed. Men sat in the dark, breathing shallow, listening to the destroyer's screws pass overhead. Thrum, thrum, thrum. A sound like a saw blade dragging across steel. The Japanese had a method. They would circle, pinging with sonar, triangulating the submarine's position, then roll depth charges off the stern in patterns calculated to bracket the target. If the first pattern missed, they adjusted. If the second missed, they adjusted again. They had time. They had fuel. The submarine had neither, and Tang waited at 400 feet, deeper than most American submarines were designed to dive. The pressure hull creaked. Water seeped through valve seals. The crew watched the depth gauge and wondered how much deeper they could go before the ocean crushed them. The destroyer made another pass. More depth charges. The lights went out. Emergency lanterns clicked on, casting red shadows. A pipe burst in the engine room, spraying hydraulic fluid across the deck. Men slipped, cursed quietly, stuffed rags into the leak. O'Kane checked his watch. 2 hours submerged. The air was thickening. Carbon dioxide levels were rising. In another hour, men would start to lose consciousness. He made a decision. Surface. Tang rose slowly, cautiously, her periscope breaking the surface first. O'Kane scanned the horizon. The destroyers were gone. The convoy was gone. The night was empty. They surfaced fully, blew the tanks, opened the hatches. Fresh air poured into the boat. The crew gasped, coughed, drank it in. The diesels roared to life. They recharged the batteries, repaired the leaks, and submerged again before dawn. For the next 2 weeks, Tang prowled the strait. She sank a tanker off the coast of China. She torpedoed a troop transport near the Pescadores. She evaded destroyers, patrol boats, aircraft. On October 23rd, she intercepted another convoy, 7 ships, 3 escorts. O'Kane attacked at night. He closed to 800 yards and fired 4 torpedoes. 3 transports sank. The escorts counterattacked. Tang dove, endured another depth charge barrage, and escaped. By October 24th, she had 2 torpedoes left. O'Kane decided to expend them both. And on the night of October 24th, Tang surfaced in the middle of a Japanese transport formation. It was insane. It was also the only way to guarantee a shot. The moon was down. Visibility was near zero. O'Kane maneuvered between the transports so close that the crew could hear voices on the enemy decks, see the glow of cigarettes. He fired the first torpedo. It struck a transport amidships. The ship listed, began to sink. He swung the boat around and fired the second. The torpedo leaped from the tube, its motor screaming. Then the gyroscope failed. The torpedo broached, broke the surface, carved a wild arc, and came back. There was no time to dive. No time to turn. The crew saw it coming, a white wake racing toward the stern. It struck Tang just aft of the conning tower. The explosion tore through the aft torpedo room. Water poured in. The boat lurched, tilted, began to sink stern. First, men scrambled forward, sealing hatches, trying to isolate the flooding. The lights went out. The emergency systems failed. The boat slid backward into the dark. O'Kane shouted orders. Blow forward ballast. Level the boat. Close the vents. But the controls were jammed. The pumps were dead. The stern kept sinking. Tang settled on the bottom at 180 feet. 13 men were still alive in the forward compartments. O'Kane was one of them. They had no power, no air circulation, no way to surface. The water was rising. The air was foul. They had maybe an hour. O'Kane ordered the crew to don Momsen lungs, primitive escape devices consisting of a rubber bag, a mouthpiece, and a canister of soda lime to scrub CO2. The idea was simple. Flood the compartment, equalize pressure, and to open the hatch and swim. In practice, it was lethal. The men were not trained for deep escapes. Most had never used the device. The pressure at 180 feet could rupture lungs, bend joints, cause nitrogen narcosis. O'Kane didn't care. It was their only chance. One by one they flooded the escape trunk. One by one they climbed in, sealed the hatch behind them, opened the vent, and let the ocean crush them. The first man made it to the surface. The second drowned halfway up. The third panicked and inhaled water. The fourth reached the surface but was too weak to swim and sank again. O'Kane went last. He climbed into the trunk, closed the hatch, opened the vent. Water poured in, ice cold, black, suffocating. The pressure built until his skull felt like it would split. He put the Momsen lung in his mouth and breathed. The air tasted like rubber and lime. He opened the outer hatch and kicked. He rose through the dark, his lungs screaming, his vision tunneling. He broke the surface, gasped, and saw fire. The transports were burning. Debris floated everywhere, planks, bodies, oil slicks. He swam toward a piece of wreckage and clung to it. Around him, 8 other men surfaced. 9 survivors out of a crew of 87. At dawn, a Japanese destroyer picked them up. They were taken to Japan, interrogated, beaten, held in camps where prisoners ate seaweed and sawdust, where dysentery and pneumonia killed as efficiently as bullets. O'Kane watched 2 of his men die from starvation. He survived by rationing his strength, keeping his mind sharp, counting days. When the war ended in August 1945, O'Kane weighed 90 pounds. He could barely stand, but he was alive. The Navy awarded him the Medal of Honor. Tang was credited with sinking 33 ships, more than any other American submarine in the war. O'Kane was recognized as the most successful submarine commander in U.S. history. But he never spoke of it as success. He spoke of it as duty, as mathematics, as the cost of choking an empire. The torpedo that sank Tang was a Mark 18, an electric model introduced to replace the failure-prone Mark 14. It was supposed to be reliable. It was supposed to run straight, but torpedoes, like all weapons, were built by the lowest bidder, tested in peacetime and used in war. They malfunctioned. They circled. They killed the men who fired them. That was the irony of the submarine war. The enemy was not just the destroyers above or the depth charges falling. It was the equipment, and the pressure, the air, the darkness, the mind. Every dive was a test. Every surfacing was a gamble. The ocean did not distinguish between friend and enemy. It crushed indiscriminately. And yet men like O'Kane kept diving. In the post-war years, O'Kane was asked why he took such risks, why he closed to point-blank range, why he stayed on patrol until the last torpedo was gone. His answer was always the same: because the mission required it, because the convoy had to be stopped, because the empire had to be starved. There was no bravado in his voice, no romance, just calculation. He understood that war was not a series of battles, but a ledger. Tonnage sunk, resources denied, time bought. Every freighter sent to the bottom was one less division supplied. Every tanker destroyed was one less carrier fueled. The submarine did not win the war, but it made victory possible. And the men who crewed those boats did not think of themselves as heroes. They thought of themselves as sailors doing a job. Dangerous, unglamorous, necessary. They went down into the steel tubes, sealed the hatches, and descended into a world where the only sound was the hum of the motors and the echo of their own breathing. They hunted. They hid. They killed, they died, and they did it again the next day. October 27th, 1944. The water was black. The destroyer was closing. The torpedo turned. Tang did not survive, but her crew had already written the end of the story. In 4 patrols, they had sent 100,000 tons of Japanese shipping to the bottom. They had cut supply lines, diverted destroyers, forced the Empire to reroute convoys and burn fuel it could not replace. They had done their job. And when the last torpedo came back, when the explosion tore through the hull, when the boat sank stern first into the dark, they did not surrender. They flooded the compartments, they opened the hatches, they swam. 9 men survived, 78 did not. But the mission continued. Other boats took up the patrol. Other crews dove into the black water. Other torpedoes found their marks. The Empire starved. The war ended. The silent service lived up to its name. There is a memorial now in Pearl Harbor where the names of the lost submarines are engraved in stone. Tang is among them. Visitors stand on the dock and look out at the water and wonder what it was like. Down there, in the dark, with the depth charges falling and the pressure rising and the air running out. They wonder if they could have done it. The answer is written in the stone. 78 men did, and they would do it again.